I discovered my daughter had stolen my credit cards and taken a secret vacation when the fraud alert woke me at 3 in the morning. By the time she returned home 2 weeks later, tanned and smiling, I had already sold the house, liquidated everything I owned, and disappeared without leaving a forwarding address. My name is Simone, and this is the story of how my only child taught me that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones you'd die to protect. If anyone had asked me a year ago what kind of mother I was, I would have said devoted, maybe too devoted. My daughter Maya was 28 years old, living in the guest house behind my property in a quiet neighborhood outside Seattle, and I had convinced myself that supporting her was what good mothers did. I paid her rent. I paid her car insurance. I covered her phone bill and her gym membership and the Netflix account she shared with whatever boyfriend was currently sleeping in my guest house. I told myself she was finding her path, that the economy was hard for young people, that she just needed time. The truth was simpler and more painful. I had raised a woman who saw me as a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be loved. Before the story begins, please leave us a comment telling us which state or city you are watching from. Do not forget to like and subscribe so this channel can grow and bring you more exciting stories. That Wednesday morning in late September, my phone vibrated on the nightstand with an urgency that pulled me from sleep. The screen glowed in the darkness of my bedroom, showing a text from my bank's fraud prevention department. Unusual activity detected on your account. Please verify the following transactions. My heart hammered as I scrolled through the list. A charge for $2,000 at a luxury resort, another $1,500 at a high-end restaurant, $800 at a boutique I'd never heard of. All of the charges were in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. All of them had been made in the last 6 hours. I sat up in bed, my hands trembling as I opened my banking app. The transactions kept coming, updating in real time. Another charge, another. My checking account, which had held a comfortable cushion for emergencies, was hemorrhaging money. I watched the balance drop with each refresh, my breath coming faster, my chest tightening with something that felt like drowning. I called the fraud department immediately. The representative who answered had the practiced sympathy of someone who dealt with theft every day. "I'm so sorry this is happening, ma'am. Can you confirm your current location?" "I'm at home," I said, my voice shaking. "In Seattle. I haven't left the city." "And your credit card is in your possession?" I was already moving, stumbling out of bed and toward my purse. I dumped the contents onto my dresser, my hands clumsy with panic. My wallet was there. I opened it. Both credit cards were missing. The slots where they should have been gaped empty, accusing. "They're gone," I whispered. "Someone took them." The representative's voice remained calm. "We're going to freeze both accounts immediately. You'll need to file a police report and we'll start an investigation. Can you think of anyone who might have had access to your cards?" I could think of exactly one person. The same person who had asked to borrow money last week. The same person who had access to my house, my purse, my entire life. The same person I had trusted so completely that I never thought to question or doubt or protect myself. "My daughter," I said, and the words tasted like ash. "My daughter has keys to my house." I called Maya immediately. The phone rang 6 times before going to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. I sent a text, my fingers jabbing at the screen. "Maya, call me right now. It's an emergency." The message showed as delivered but not read. I waited 5 minutes that felt like 5 hours, pacing my bedroom floor, my mind spinning through explanations that made sense. Maybe someone had broken into the guest house and stolen her things along with my cards. Maybe she was in danger. Maybe this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But I knew. Somewhere deep in my gut, in that place where mothers know things they don't want to know, I knew. I threw on clothes and went outside. The September air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of pine and approaching rain. The guest house sat at the back of my property, separated from the main house by a small garden I'd planted years ago, when I still believed my daughter and I would spend weekends together tending vegetables. The lights were off. I used my key to let myself in. The guest house was empty. Not just empty of people, but empty of the usual signs of Maya's chaotic presence. No clothes thrown over chairs, no makeup scattered across the bathroom counter, no dishes piled in the sink. I opened her closet and found it half empty, the remaining hangers swaying slightly in the draft from the open door. Her suitcase was gone. Her favorite shoes were gone. The framed photo of us from her college graduation, the one that usually sat on her nightstand, was still there, but it had been turned face down. I picked up the frame with shaking hands and turned it over. We looked so happy in the photo. I had been so proud that day, so certain that I had done everything right, that all my sacrifices had been worth it. Maya in her cap and gown, me beside her with my arm around her shoulders and tears in my eyes. When had she started to hate me? When had I become nothing more than a bank account to be drained? My phone buzzed. For a wild moment, I thought it might be Maya calling to explain, to apologize, to tell me this was all some horrible mistake. Instead, it was another fraud alert, a charge for first-class plane tickets, a charge for spa services, a charge for a yacht rental. I sat down on the edge of Maya's stripped bed and let myself cry. Not the pretty crying of movies, but the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose heart is breaking in real time. I cried for the money, yes, but more than that, I cried for the betrayal. For the casual cruelty of a daughter who would steal from her mother and then get on a plane to enjoy the spoils. For the years I'd spent convincing myself that if I just loved her enough, supported her enough, gave her enough, she would eventually become the person I'd raised her to be. I had been so stupid. When the tears finally stopped, I was left with something colder and clearer. I sat in the empty guest house as dawn broke outside, as the light changed from black to gray to pale gold, and I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The mother who had walked into this room was gone. The woman who remained knew exactly what she had to do. I spent that first day gathering evidence. I took photographs of the empty guest house, of the charges on my credit cards, of the text messages I'd sent that had gone unanswered. I filed a police report, speaking in a voice that sounded strangely calm to my own ears as I explained that my daughter had stolen from me. The officer taking the report looked at me with something like pity, which I hated, but I answered every question precisely and completely. Yes, she had access to my home. Yes, she had taken items without permission before, but never anything this significant. Yes, I wanted to press charges. That last question hung in the air between us. The officer waited, pen poised over his notepad. Ma'am, I have to ask, are you certain you want to pursue this? Family matters can be complicated. I'm certain, I said, and I was. The bank's investigation would take weeks, they told me. In the meantime, my accounts were frozen. I couldn't access the money that was still there, couldn't stop the charges that were still coming through. I watched my life savings evaporate in real time, helpless to prevent it. By the end of that first week, Maya had spent $37,000. $37,000 that I'd saved over years of work, of sacrifices, of careful planning. I had been a nurse for 30 years. I'd worked double shifts and holiday weekends. I'd gone without new clothes and postponed vacations and driven my car until it had 200,000 miles on it. All of that sacrifice, converted into spa days and yacht rentals and bottles of champagne I would never taste. But here's what Maya didn't know. Here's what she couldn't have known because she'd never bothered to pay attention to my life, my work, my careful planning. I had more than one bank account. The money she was draining so gleefully was my checking account, the one I used for daily expenses. It represented about a fifth of my total savings. The rest was locked in retirement accounts and investment funds she didn't know existed. I had been poor once, truly poor, and I had learned never to keep all my resources in one place. So while she spent and spent and spent, thinking she was destroying me, I was making plans. The idea came to me on the third day, while I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the wall. I had called in sick to work, unable to face the questions and concern of my colleagues. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I could only sit and think and feel the weight of my daughter's betrayal pressing down on me like a physical thing. And in that darkness, in that pressure, something crystallized. I didn't have to wait for her to come back. I didn't have to confront her or listen to her excuses or give her the opportunity to cry and apologize and promise to change. I didn't have to play the role she'd written for me, the endlessly forgiving mother who would eventually take her back because that's what mothers did. I could leave. I could simply disappear. The thought was so radical, so unlike anything I'd ever considered, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. Leave my home? Leave my job? Leave my entire life? But as I sat with the idea, let it settle into my mind, I realized it wasn't radical at all. It was obvious. It was the only response that made sense. Maya had taken my money. I would take everything else. I started that afternoon. I called a real estate agent, a woman I'd worked with years ago when I bought the house. Her name was Patricia, and she remembered me. "Simone, how wonderful to hear from you. What can I help you with?" "I need to sell my house," I said. "Fast." There was a pause. "How fast?" "2 weeks. Maybe less." Another pause. Longer this time. "Simone, is everything okay?" I could have told her the truth. Patricia was kind, the sort of person who would have listened and sympathized and possibly talked me out of what I was planning. Instead, I said, "I've had a job opportunity come up, out of state. I need to move quickly." It wasn't entirely a lie. I was planning to move. I just didn't know where yet. Patricia arrived the next morning with her camera and her measuring tape and her practiced eye for staging. She walked through my house making notes, suggesting minor repairs and improvements that would maximize the sale price. "The market is strong right now," she said. "If we price it right, we could have offers within days." "Price it to sell," I told her. "I don't care about maximizing profit, I care about speed." She looked at me sharply, but I met her gaze with calm determination. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I'll have the listing up by tonight." I spent the next week in a frenzy of activity that left no room for second thoughts. I sorted through 30 years of accumulated belongings, separating my life into 3 piles: keep, donate, trash. The keep pile was surprisingly small: clothes that fit in 3 suitcases, important documents in a fireproof lockbox, photographs from before Maya learned to weaponize my love against me. Everything else could go. I donated furniture to charity. I sold my car to a used dealership for less than it was worth because I needed cash and I needed it immediately. I closed out the utility accounts and scheduled final payments. I worked with the efficiency of someone possessed, because if I slowed down, if I gave myself time to think, I might lose my nerve. The house sold in 4 days. A young couple with a baby on the way offered asking price, cash, with a closing in 10 days. Patricia called me with the news, her voice bright with triumph. "They're pre-approved and motivated. This is incredible, Simone. I've never seen anything move this fast." "Good," I said. "Tell them yes." Maya called me once during those 2 weeks. Just once. I was in the middle of packing boxes when my phone rang, her name appearing on the screen like an accusation. My hand hovered over the answer button. Part of me, the part that was still a mother despite everything, wanted to pick up. Wanted to hear her voice. Wanted to give her the chance to explain. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. I changed my phone number the next day, cut that thread cleanly, completely. The guest house remained empty, a silent accusation at the back of my property. I didn't go inside it again after that first morning. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what I would find there. Nothing. The same nothing my daughter saw when she looked at me. I told almost no one what I was doing. My closest friend, a woman I'd worked with for 15 years, knew only that I was moving. "Kind of sudden, isn't it?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral over the phone. "It's time," I said, which was both true and completely inadequate. "And Maya?" "Maya has her own life." There was a long silence. Then, very quietly, "Simone, what happened?" I could have told her. Could have poured out the whole ugly story. Could have accepted the comfort she would have offered. Instead, I said, "I'm tired of being convenient." She understood. I heard it in the way she exhaled, in the shift in her voice when she spoke again. "Where are you going?" "I don't know yet." "Will you stay in touch?" I thought about that. Thought about the life I was leaving, the connections I was severing. "Maybe," I said. "Eventually." It wasn't a lie. I genuinely didn't know. All I knew was that I needed to be somewhere Maya couldn't find me, couldn't reach me, couldn't hurt me anymore. The day before closing, I did a final walkthrough of my house. The rooms echoed emptily, stripped of the furniture and photographs and small decorations that had made this place mine. I moved through each space slowly, remembering. The kitchen where I'd taught Maya to bake cookies when she was 7. The living room where we'd watched movies together, her head on my shoulder. The backyard where she'd played as a child, running through the sprinklers on hot summer days. Good memories. They'd all been good memories once. When had they curdled? When had my love become something to exploit rather than treasure? I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. Instead, I stood in the center of my empty living room and felt something like relief. This house, these memories, they weren't mine anymore. They belonged to the woman I used to be, the mother who believed that unconditional love was always enough. I knew better now. The closing took 2 hours. I sat across from the young couple buying my house and signed document after document, my signature steady and sure. They chattered excitedly about their plans for the place, the nursery they would create, the garden they wanted to plant. They had no idea they were buying a house where a daughter had systematically destroyed her mother's trust. They saw only the good bones, the solid foundation, the potential for happiness. I hoped they found it. I hoped they filled these rooms with love that didn't turn poisonous. The check they handed me was substantial, not life-changing money, but enough. Enough to start over. Enough to disappear. I deposited it immediately into a new bank account at a new bank, one with no connection to my old life. The money from my frozen account would be returned eventually, once the investigation concluded, but I didn't need it anymore. I'd already moved on. I spent my last night in the city at an airport hotel, lying awake in a generic room that could have been anywhere. My 3 suitcases were stacked neatly by the door. My important documents were in the lockbox beside the bed. Everything I owned in the world, condensed down to what I could carry. I felt light, untethered, free. I still didn't know where I was going. I'd spent hours researching, looking at maps, reading about different cities and towns. Somewhere warm, I thought. Somewhere I'd never been. Somewhere Maya would never think to look for me. I had narrowed it down to 3 possibilities, but I couldn't quite commit. Maybe I'd decide in the morning. Maybe I'd flip a coin. Maybe I'd close my eyes and point at a map. It didn't really matter. Anywhere was better than here. My new phone, the one with the number Maya didn't have, buzzed with an email notification. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was from the police department, an update on my report. They'd made contact with Maya. She was returning to the country tomorrow, flying back from Mexico. They wanted to know if I would be available to give a statement. Tomorrow. She'd be home tomorrow. I lay in the dark hotel room and thought about timing. Thought about Maya walking into the house and finding it empty. Sold, gone. Thought about her calling my number and getting the disconnected message. Thought about her standing in that empty space, finally understanding that actions had consequences, that you couldn't steal from someone and expect them to wait patiently for your return. I could have timed this differently, could have stayed until she got back, confronted her face to face, given her the chance to see what she'd done. Part of me wanted that. Wanted to watch her face as she realized what she'd lost. But a larger part, the part that had been growing stronger these past 2 weeks, knew that confrontation would solve nothing. Maya would cry. She would apologize. She would promise to change and beg for forgiveness and tell me she loved me. And some weak, mother-shaped part of me might believe her, might give in, might sacrifice myself one more time on the altar of her needs. No, this was better, clean, final. A disappearance that left no room for negotiation or manipulation. I replied to the police email. I would not be available for a statement. I was relocating out of state. They could reach me via email if needed. I provided my new email address, the one I'd set up specifically for this purpose, and then I turned off my phone. Sleep came eventually, shallow and dreamless. I woke before dawn and lay in the dark, listening to the sound of traffic on the highway outside. In a few hours, Maya would land. She would take a taxi or an Uber to the house. She would see the sold sign in the yard. She would use her key and find the place empty. Would she panic? Would she feel afraid? Would she finally understand what she'd done? I hoped so. God help me. I hoped she felt every bit of the fear and confusion and abandonment that I'd felt when I saw those charges on my credit card. I hoped she spent years regretting her choices. But even as I hoped for it, I knew it probably wouldn't happen. People like Maya, people who could steal from their own mothers without apparent guilt, they didn't change, they didn't learn. They found new victims and repeated the same patterns and convinced themselves they were the ones who'd been wronged. That was fine. She could be who she was. I just didn't have to be there to watch it anymore. I got up and showered and dressed in comfortable clothes for traveling. I packed my toiletries and did a final check of the room, making sure I'd left nothing behind. Then I wheeled my suitcases down to the lobby and checked out. The young woman at the desk smiled at me cheerfully. "Did you enjoy your stay?" "Yes," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. This anonymous room had been a cocoon, a space between my old life and whatever came next. "Traveling for business or pleasure?" "New beginning," I said finally. "How exciting! Where are you headed?" She laughed, thinking I was joking. I smiled back and didn't correct her. Let her think what she wanted. In a few hours, she wouldn't remember me at all. I took a taxi to the airport and stood in the terminal, looking at the departure boards. So many destinations. So many possibilities. I could go anywhere, be anyone. Start completely over in a place where no one knew my story or my shame or my failures as a mother. A flight was boarding to Phoenix, another to Denver, another to New Orleans. I'd never been to New Orleans. I'd always wanted to visit, to hear jazz in the old quarter and eat beignets and walk along the Mississippi. Maya knew that. In one of our better years, we'd talked about taking a trip there together, just the two of us, a mother-daughter adventure. We'd never gone. There had always been some reason, some excuse. Now I understood that Maya had never intended to go. It had just been another way to keep me hoping, keep me invested, keep me useful. I wouldn't go to New Orleans. That dream belonged to the woman I used to be. Instead, I walked up to the counter for the Phoenix flight. "Any seats available?" The agent checked her computer. "We have a few in coach. When would you like to fly?" "Today, now, the next available flight." She looked up at me, surprise flickering across her professional smile. "Let me see what I can do." 20 minutes later, I was through security with a boarding pass in my hand. I sat at the gate and watched people hurry past, everyone going somewhere, everyone with their own stories and secrets and reasons for travel. I was just one more middle-aged woman in comfortable shoes, unremarkable and easily forgotten. Perfect. My phone buzzed one final time before I turned it off completely. Another email, this one from my bank. The fraud investigation had concluded. They'd recovered some of the stolen money. A check would be mailed to my old address within 2 weeks. I almost laughed. Maya was going to show up to an empty house and find a check made out to me waiting in the mailbox. Would she try to cash it? Probably. Would she succeed? No. I'd already filed change of address paperwork that would redirect all my mail to a P.O. box I'd rented in Phoenix, a city I'd chosen 15 minutes ago for no better reason than it was far away and warm and nowhere Maya would think to look. The overhead speaker crackled to life. "Now, boarding all passengers for Flight 447 to Phoenix." I stood, picked up my carry-on, and joined the line. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me worth seeing. The plane lifted off 30 minutes later, climbing into a gray Seattle sky that matched my mood. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched the city shrink below me, the streets and buildings and neighborhoods becoming an abstract pattern of lines and shapes. Somewhere down there, Maya was landing. Somewhere down there, my old life was ending. Somewhere down there, a daughter was about to discover that mothers, even devoted ones, eventually ran out of forgiveness. I closed my eyes and didn't cry. I was done crying, done mourning, done being the kind of mother who sacrificed herself on the altar of her child's selfishness. The woman on this plane was someone new, someone harder, someone who understood that love without respect was just another form of abuse. When I opened my eyes again, the city was gone, replaced by clouds and sky and the endless possibility of distance. I settled back in my seat and let myself imagine what came next. A small apartment in a quiet neighborhood, a new job, maybe at a hospital or clinic where no one knew me. A life built on my own terms, for my own happiness, with no one to please but myself. It sounded like paradise. The flight attendant came by with drinks. I ordered a ginger ale and sipped it slowly, savoring the bite of carbonation on my tongue. Such a small thing, this drink I'd chosen for myself without consulting anyone or considering anyone else's preferences. But it felt significant somehow, this tiny act of autonomy. The man in the seat beside me pulled out a book and began to read. The woman across the aisle put in headphones and closed her eyes. We were all strangers here, sealed in this metal tube hurtling through the sky, each of us carrying our own burdens and secrets and reasons for travel. No one knew my story. No one cared. I was anonymous, invisible, free. I thought about Maya finding the empty house. I let myself picture it in detail, a final indulgence before I moved on completely. Her walking up to the door with her suitcase, still tan from her stolen vacation, using her key, stepping inside, calling out for me maybe, her voice echoing in the empty rooms, walking from room to room, confusion turning to panic, turning to understanding, seeing the sold sign, realizing what had happened, calling my number and hearing it disconnected. Standing alone in that hollow shell of a house, finally understanding that she had pushed too far, taken too much, destroyed something that couldn't be repaired. Would she cry? Would she feel remorse? Or would she just feel angry that her safety net had disappeared, that she'd have to actually take care of herself now? It didn't matter. Her feelings, her reactions, her entire existence, none of it was my problem anymore. The plane leveled out at cruising altitude. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, calm and professional, telling us about our flight time and the weather in Phoenix. Sunny and 78 degrees. Perfect. I pulled out my phone, the new one, and opened a notes app. Started making a list of things I needed to do once I landed. Find a hotel for the first few nights, look for apartments, update my nursing license with my new address, start applying for jobs, build a new life from scratch. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt manageable, straightforward. I'd done hard things before. I'd worked my way through nursing school while raising a toddler alone. I'd survived my own mother's death and a divorce and 30 years in a profession that demanded everything and paid too little. I'd survived Maya. This would be easy by comparison. The flight passed quickly. I didn't sleep, but I didn't think much either. I existed in a quiet space between past and future, letting the drone of the engines and the recycled air of the cabin wash over me like a cleansing ritual. When we began our descent into Phoenix, I looked out the window at the desert landscape below, brown and vast, and nothing like the green of Seattle. Good. I wanted different. I wanted new. I wanted a place with no memories attached. We landed smoothly. I collected my bags from the overhead compartment and shuffled off the plane with everyone else, just another tired traveler in sensible shoes. The airport was bright and modern, all glass and steel and southwestern design elements. I followed the signs to ground transportation and caught a shuttle to a hotel near the airport, a generic chain that promised clean rooms and reasonable rates. I checked in using my maiden name, Simone Garrett. I'd changed it back legally last week, one more thread cut from my old life. The clerk handed me a key card without question or curiosity. I rode the elevator to the third floor and found my room, a standard double with bland artwork and industrial carpeting. I set down my suitcases and sat on the edge of the bed. The room was quiet. The air conditioning hummed softly. Outside the window, palm trees swayed in a warm breeze I couldn't feel. I was alone in a strange city, with no job and no plan beyond the vague outline I'd sketched on the plane. I had enough money to last a few months if I was careful. I had my nursing license and my skills and 30 years of experience. I would be fine. More than fine. I would be free. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, letting myself feel the full weight of what I'd done. I'd abandoned my daughter, left her without warning or explanation or goodbye. It was cruel. It was harsh. It was exactly what she deserved. But it was also terrifying, because despite everything, despite the theft and the betrayal and the casual cruelty, she was still my daughter. Some part of me, buried deep beneath the anger and hurt, still loved her, still wanted to protect her, still whispered that I should call her, should explain, should give her one more chance. I silenced that voice. I'd listened to it for too long already. My new phone buzzed. An email from the real estate agent, confirming that all the paperwork had been finalized and the sale was complete. The house was no longer mine. That chapter was closed. Another email, this one from the police department. They'd attempted to contact me at my old number. They needed my current phone number to proceed with the investigation. I deleted it without responding. I didn't want to proceed with the investigation. I wanted to forget it had ever happened. A third email made me pause. It was from my old hospital, the one where I'd worked for 15 years, my supervisor writing to check on me. I'd called in sick 2 weeks ago and never returned. They were concerned. Was I all right? Did I need anything? When could they expect me back? I read the email twice, feeling a pang of something that might have been guilt. These people had been good to me. They deserved better than a disappearing act. I composed a careful response. I was resigning, effective immediately. I apologized for the lack of notice. I was dealing with a family emergency that required me to relocate. I thanked them for the years we'd worked together. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. One more tie cut, one more piece of my old life released. I ordered room service for dinner, something I never did because it was too expensive, too indulgent. But tonight, I was celebrating, in my own quiet way. I ate club sandwich and fries while watching mindless television, not really paying attention to the shows, but grateful for the noise, the distraction, the normalcy of it. When I finally slept, I dreamed of empty rooms and disconnected phone numbers and the sound of someone calling my name from very far away. I woke in the gray pre-dawn light, disoriented for a moment, not sure where I was. Then I remembered. Phoenix. Freedom. A new beginning. I got up and showered and dressed, then sat at the small desk by the window with my laptop. Time to start building my new life in earnest. I searched for apartments, marking possibilities that fit my budget and my desire for anonymity. I looked at job listings for hospitals and clinics, noting which ones were hiring. I researched neighborhoods, trying to get a feel for the city I'd chosen on impulse. By noon, I'd scheduled 3 apartment viewings for the next day and submitted applications to 4 different medical facilities. By evening, I'd opened a new bank account at a local credit union and bought a used car from a dealership that asked no questions and accepted cash. It was a practical sedan in a forgettable beige, perfect for someone who wanted to blend in and disappear. I was moving forward, one step at a time, one decision at a time, building a life that belonged only to me. 3 days later, I signed a lease on a small one-bedroom apartment in a quiet complex on the edge of the city. It had tile floors and a tiny balcony and a view of a parking lot, and it was perfect. I bought furniture at thrift stores and discount warehouses, choosing pieces for function rather than sentiment. A bed, a table, a chair, dishes, towels. The basics, nothing more. I didn't hang pictures on the walls. I didn't buy decorative pillows or throw blankets or any of the small touches that made a house a home. This was a place to live, not a place to put down roots. I wasn't ready for roots. Maybe I'd never be ready again. 2 weeks after arriving in Phoenix, I got a job offer from a small community clinic in a working-class neighborhood. The pay was less than what I'd made in Seattle, but it was enough. The hours were reasonable. The staff seemed kind. I accepted immediately. My first day, the other nurses welcomed me with the casual warmth of people who'd seen plenty of colleagues come and go. They asked the basic questions: where I was from, what brought me to Phoenix, did I have family in the area. I answered vaguely, offering just enough information to be polite without inviting deeper inquiry. I was good at that now, the art of being friendly without being known. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and checked my email. Nothing from Maya. I didn't know why I'd expected something. She didn't have this email address. She had no way to reach me. That had been the entire point. But there was an email from my bank, the old one in Seattle. The fraud investigation had concluded successfully. They'd recovered 23,000 of the 37,000 Maya had stolen. The money had been returned to my account. Since that account was closed, they needed me to provide information for where to send the funds. $23,000. Not everything, but more than I'd expected to see again. I thought about that money, about what it represented. Those were hours of my life, shifts I'd worked, overtime I'd volunteered for. Maya had treated it like monopoly money, like something that would magically replenish itself no matter how much she took. I provided my new account information and hit send. The money would take a few days to transfer. When it arrived, I would put it in savings and try not to think about where it had been or what it had bought. The weeks passed. I fell into a routine. Work during the day, where I lost myself in the familiar rhythms of patient care. Home in the evening, where I ate simple meals and read books and went to bed early. Weekends spent exploring my new city, walking through neighborhoods I didn't know, eating at restaurants where no one recognized me. I made no friends. I dated no one. I existed in a bubble of careful isolation, speaking to people at work and in stores, but never letting anyone close enough to ask real questions or expect real answers. I was polite, I was professional, I was alone. It should have been lonely. Instead, it was peaceful. 6 weeks after I left Seattle, I finally heard from Maya. Not directly, she still couldn't reach me directly, but through my old email address, the one I'd kept active specifically to see if she would try to contact me. The subject line was simple: "Mom, please." I stared at that subject line for a long time before I opened the email. My finger hovered over the delete button. I could just erase it, pretend I'd never seen it, maintain the clean break I'd worked so hard to create. But curiosity won. I needed to know what she would say, how she would try to manipulate me this time. The email was long, rambling, full of apologies and excuses and pleas for forgiveness. She was sorry. She'd made a terrible mistake. She'd been going through a hard time and hadn't been thinking clearly. She needed help. She needed her mother. She was begging me to tell her where I was, to give her a chance to make things right. She'd lost the guest house, of course. With me gone and the property sold, she had nowhere to live. She was staying with a friend, she said, but it was temporary. She needed money for first and last month's rent on an apartment. She'd pay me back, she promised. She'd changed. She'd learned her lesson. If I would just help her this one last time. I read the email 3 times, watching for the place where she took responsibility for what she'd done. It never came. The theft was a mistake. Her behavior was the result of going through a hard time. Even her apology was couched in excuses and justifications. She was sorry I was hurt, sorry things had gotten so out of hand, but never, not once, did she simply say, "I was wrong. I stole from you. I betrayed your trust. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." She didn't know how to take responsibility. Maybe she never would. I closed the email without responding, marked it as read, and moved it to a folder I labeled Archive. Not deleted, not yet. I wasn't ready to delete it, but I wasn't ready to respond either. The next day, another email, and the day after that, another. Maya was persistent, I'd give her that. The tone of the emails shifted as I continued not to respond. Apologetic turned to angry. How could I just abandon her like this? What kind of mother left her own daughter without a word? I was cruel. I was heartless. I owed her an explanation at the very least. I read these emails with detached interest, like studying a fascinating psychological case. The narcissism, the entitlement, the complete inability to see herself as anything other than the victim. It was almost impressive, in a horrifying sort of way. After 2 weeks of daily emails, they stopped. Just stopped. One day there was an email, furious and accusatory, and then nothing. Silence. I told myself I was relieved. This was what I'd wanted, after all. For Maya to give up, move on, leave me alone. I'd gotten my wish. So why did the silence feel worse than the emails? I pushed the feeling aside and focused on my work, on building my new life. I got better at my job, learning the rhythms of the clinic and the needs of our patient population. I found a yoga studio I liked and started going twice a week. I discovered a farmer's market on Saturday mornings where I bought fresh vegetables and homemade bread. Small pleasures, small routines, a small life. 3 months after leaving Seattle, I was sitting on my balcony one evening when my phone rang. Not the new phone, that one rarely rang, but I'd kept my old phone, the one with the disconnected number, in a drawer. I'd charged it once a month, compulsively, unable to quite let it go, and now it was ringing. I dug it out of the drawer where I'd buried it beneath old receipts and forgotten pens. The number on the screen was one I didn't recognize, local to Seattle. I stared at it, my heart beating faster. I should let it go to voicemail. I should turn the phone off and put it back in the drawer and forget about it, I answered. Hello? Silence on the other end. Not empty silence, but the kind filled with someone breathing, someone trying to decide whether to speak. Hello? I said again. Mom. Maya's voice, small and broken. Nothing like the angry, entitled tone of her emails. Mom, please don't hang up. I should have hung up, should have pressed the red button and ended the call and thrown the phone away. Instead, I said, How did you get this number? I've been calling it every day for 3 months. Today it finally rang instead of going straight to disconnected. She was crying. I could hear it in her voice, the wet, gasping quality of real tears. Mom, please. I just need to know you're okay. I just need to know you're safe. I'm fine, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant, cold. Where are you? That's not your concern. Mom, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can fix this. We can work through it. Just tell me where you are and I'll come to you. We can talk. I can explain. There's nothing to explain, I said. You stole from me. You went on vacation with money you took from my accounts. Those are facts. What is there to explain? I was in a bad place. My boyfriend, he convinced me that you owed me, that you'd been holding me back. He said we deserved a vacation, that you'd never miss the money. I know it was wrong. I know that now. But I was confused and he was manipulative and I made a terrible choice. There it was. The blame shifting. It wasn't her fault. It was the boyfriend's fault. She was the victim of his manipulation, not the perpetrator of theft. Where's the boyfriend now? I asked, already knowing the answer. Maya's silence told me everything. Of course he was gone. Of course he'd left as soon as the money ran out or the consequences got real. Men like that always did. It doesn't matter, she said finally. He doesn't matter. What matters is us. You're my mom. I'm your daughter. We're family. Family forgives each other. Family respects each other, I said. Family doesn't steal and lie and disappear on stolen vacations. I know. I know all of that. And I'm sorry. Being sorry isn't enough, I said. Sorry doesn't give me back my sense of safety. Sorry doesn't restore my trust. Sorry is just a word you say when you want something from me. That's not fair. Isn't it? Tell me, Maya, in this entire conversation, have you once asked how I'm doing? Have you asked if I'm happy, if I'm safe, if I have what I need? Or have you only asked where I am so you can find me and get me to help you again? Silence. Long, damning silence. That's what I thought, I said softly. I do care about you, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. I do love you. Maybe you do, in your own way. But Maya, your love comes with a price tag, and I'm tired of paying it. So that's it? You're just done? After everything we've been through, everything we've meant to each other, you're just walking away? You walked away first, I reminded her. You walked away the moment you put my credit cards in your purse and got on that plane. You chose a vacation over our relationship. I'm just respecting that choice. I didn't think you'd leave. I didn't think you'd actually leave. And there it was. The truth beneath all the apologies and promises. She hadn't thought I would leave. She thought I would stay, would wait, would forgive, because that's what I'd always done before. She thought she could take and take and take, and I would always be there, waiting with open arms and an open wallet. She'd been wrong. I have to go, I said. Wait. Mom, wait, please. Can we at least talk again? Can I call you sometimes? Can we just, I don't know, try to rebuild something? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Could we rebuild? Was there anything left to build on? Or were we just two people connected by biology and history, with nothing substantial holding us together anymore? I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe someday, but not now. Right now I need space. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not your mother first and a person second. How long? Her voice was very small. How long do you need? I don't know that either. But you'll call me, eventually? You'll let me know you're okay? Maybe, I said. It was the best I could offer. The only honesty I had left. I love you, Mom. The words should have meant something, should have softened the hard edges of my anger. Instead, they just made me tired. Take care of yourself, Maya. I ended the call before she could respond, turned off the phone and put it back in the drawer. This time, I didn't plan to charge it again. I sat on my balcony as the sun set over Phoenix, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. The air was cooling, the desert giving up the day's heat. Somewhere in Seattle, Maya was probably crying, probably calling that number again and again, getting voicemail, getting nothing. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt like a bad mother, a cruel person, someone who'd failed at the most basic human relationship. Instead, I felt nothing, just a vast, peaceful emptiness where my love for my daughter used to live. Maybe that would change. Maybe someday I'd miss her. Maybe someday I'd regret this choice, this disappearance, this final severing of ties. But I didn't think so. I thought I'd done what I should have done years ago. I'd chosen myself. I'd walked away from someone who hurt me, regardless of the biology that connected us. I went inside and made dinner, something simple, just for me. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite, present in the moment in a way I hadn't been for years. After dinner, I washed my single plate and single fork and single glass. I read for a while, a novel I'd picked up at a used bookstore, nothing important or profound, just a story to lose myself in. When I finally went to bed, I slept deeply and dreamlessly, the sleep of someone who'd finally put down a burden they'd been carrying too long. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run, something I'd started doing in Phoenix. The air was cool and dry, perfect for exercise. I ran through my neighborhood, past houses where other people were beginning their days, other lives I knew nothing about, everyone carrying their own burdens, everyone with their own stories. Mine was just one among millions. Nothing special, nothing unique. Just a mother who'd loved her daughter too much and had finally learned that sometimes love wasn't enough. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached, and then I ran a little further, pushing myself, testing my limits, seeing how far I could go. When I finally stopped, bent over with my hands on my knees, gasping for breath, I felt something like joy. My body was strong, my mind was clear. I was alone, yes, but I was also free. Free to make choices based on my own needs. Free to build a life that served me. Free to exist without constantly bracing for the next disappointment, the next betrayal, the next time my daughter would prove that she saw me as a resource rather than a person. I walked home slowly, cooling down, watching the city wake up around me. Phoenix in the early morning was beautiful in its own stark way, all hard edges and bright light and endless sky. Nothing soft about it, nothing forgiving. It suited me perfectly. Over the following months, I continued building my quiet life. I got promoted at work, taking on more responsibility and earning the trust of my colleagues. I made a few friends, carefully, keeping them at arm's length, but enjoying their company nonetheless. I took a pottery class at the community center and discovered I had no talent for it whatsoever, but I enjoyed the meditative quality of working with clay. I heard nothing from Maya. The emails stopped. The phone calls stopped. Either she'd finally accepted that I was gone, or she'd found someone new to exploit. I told myself I didn't care which. Occasionally, in quiet moments, I thought about her. Wondered if she was okay. Wondered if she'd really gotten that job, really gone to therapy, really changed. But I didn't wonder enough to reach out. Didn't wonder enough to break the silence I'd worked so hard to create. She'd made her choices. I'd made mine. We both had to live with the consequences. 1 year after leaving Seattle, I was sitting in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning when a young woman at the next table started crying. She was trying to be quiet about it, wiping her eyes with napkins and keeping her head down, but I noticed. Hard not to notice someone in pain. I debated for a moment, then leaned over. "Are you okay?" She looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and swollen. She couldn't have been more than 25. "I'm fine. Sorry, I'm fine." "You don't look fine." She laughed, a wet, broken sound. "No, I guess I don't." She hesitated, then said, "My mom and I just had a huge fight. She said some really hurtful things. I said some really hurtful things back. And now I don't know if we'll ever be able to fix it." I should have offered sympathy, should have told her that mothers and daughters always find their way back to each other, that family bonds are unbreakable, that love conquers all. Instead, I heard myself say, "Maybe it doesn't need to be fixed." She blinked. "What?" "Maybe," I said carefully, "some relationships aren't worth saving. Even family ones. Maybe sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away." She stared at me like I'd suggested something obscene. "But she's my mother." "And that gives her the right to hurt you?" "No, but it's complicated. Family is complicated." "Yes," I agreed. "It is. But complicated doesn't mean you have to accept being treated badly. It doesn't mean you have to sacrifice yourself to maintain a relationship with someone who doesn't respect you." She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then, very softly, "Did you walk away from someone?" "Yes." She stared at me like I'd suggested something obscene. "Do you regret it?" I thought about Maya, about the daughter I'd raised and loved and ultimately lost, about the year I'd spent building a new life without her, about the peace I'd found in her absence. "No," I said. "I don't regret it at all." The young woman nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I don't know if I can do that. Walk away, I mean. She's all the family I have." "Then don't," I said simply. "But know that you could. Know that it's an option, that you're not trapped. That's important too." She smiled just a little. "Thank you. I don't know. That helps somehow." I smiled back and returned to my coffee, leaving her to her thoughts. I didn't know her story, didn't know if her mother was genuinely toxic or if they were just going through a rough patch, didn't know if she'd take my advice or dismiss it. It didn't matter. I'd said what I needed to say, offered a perspective that no one had offered me when I was drowning in my daughter's demands. The idea that walking away was okay, that protecting yourself was okay, that you didn't owe anyone, not even family, unlimited chances to hurt you. Maybe she'd remember it. Maybe someday, when things got bad enough, she'd think about the stranger in the coffee shop who told her she didn't have to stay, and maybe, just maybe, she'd find the courage to leave. I finished my coffee and left, stepping out into the bright Phoenix sunshine. The heat hit me immediately, but I didn't mind. I'd learned to love the desert heat, the way it baked everything clean and harsh and real. I walked to my car, just another middle-aged woman in a city of strangers. Anonymous, unknown, exactly how I wanted it. My phone buzzed with a text from one of my coworkers, inviting me to a barbecue that afternoon. I hesitated, my usual instinct to decline, to maintain my careful isolation. But then I thought about the young woman in the coffee shop, about building a life, not just surviving in the absence of my old one. I texted back, "I'll be there. Small steps, small connections, a life built piece by piece, on my own terms." That evening at the barbecue, surrounded by people who knew me only as Simone from work, I found myself laughing at something someone said. Real laughter, from deep in my belly, the kind I hadn't experienced in years. The kind that comes when you're not bracing for the next disaster, not waiting for the other shoe to drop, not constantly calculating how to manage someone else's emotions. I was just there, just present, just myself. Later, driving home in the desert twilight, I thought about the path that had brought me here. The betrayal, the theft, the decision to disappear. It had all felt so dramatic at the time, so extreme. But now, a year later, it just felt necessary, inevitable, the only possible response to an impossible situation. I didn't know what the future held. Didn't know if I'd ever hear from Maya again, or if I'd want to respond if I did. Didn't know if I'd stay in Phoenix forever or move again, chasing some new beginning in some new city. Didn't know if I'd ever really trust anyone again, or if I'd spend the rest of my life in this careful isolation I'd built. But I knew I was okay. Better than okay. I was building something real, something solid, something that belonged only to me. And that was enough. More than enough. That night, before bed, I stood on my little balcony and looked out at the city lights spreading across the valley. Somewhere out there were millions of people living millions of lives. Some of them were probably dealing with their own versions of what I'd been through, their own betrayals, their own impossible choices, their own journeys from victim to survivor. I hoped they found their way. I hoped they learned what I'd learned, that you can love someone and still walk away, that protecting yourself isn't selfish, that starting over is hard but possible, that you are more than your relationships, more than your role as parent or child or partner, that you are, fundamentally and essentially, yourself, and that self is worth protecting. I went inside and got ready for bed, following my familiar routine. Locked the door, brushed my teeth, set my alarm, small, ordinary actions that added up to a life. My life, mine alone, hard-won and precious because of it. I climbed into bed and turned off the light. Tomorrow I'd wake up and go to work and come home and make dinner and maybe read or watch TV or go for another run. Small, ordinary days adding up to something larger. A life lived on my terms. A future I was building one decision at a time. It wasn't the life I'd planned. It wasn't the happy ending I'd imagined when I first held my newborn daughter in my arms 28 years ago. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And finally, after so many years of living for someone else, that was all that mattered. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, peaceful and dreamless and free. What did you think of the journey? I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. You'll find 2 more powerful life stories on your screen right now that I think you'll really connect with. And there's plenty more waiting for you on the channel. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story. Until next time, thank you for listening. With love and respect.